Clone systems, clone systems, clone systems! Seems like every time you turn around, there's a new clone system being announced, a new clone system being released. And you know what? I'm cool with it. Clone systems, I think, are a fun way for people to get into retro gaming who might not have really been into retro gaming before. And yes, there are a lot of clone systems out there, but I always feel that cream of the crop rises to the top. So I love checking out different clone systems on this channel. I try to check out as many as humanly possible. Well, Retrobit recently released a new clone system called the Super Retro Trio Plus. Now this is an HD version of the Super Retro Trio that released a couple years ago. Ryan from Castlemania asked me if I wanted to check one out on the channel, and I said yes sir. So he sent one over, and that's what we're going to check out today, the Super Retro Trio Plus. See what it's all about, see what games it plays, and see if it's something you might be interested in. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about the Super Retro Trio Plus.
Hey, RGT 85. Hey, Sean.
Oh my god, it's Stevie Richards! Alright, so before we get into the games, I figured we'd take a look at the system and the controllers. Sometimes I do an unboxing, but then I realized I'm pretty much just showing you guys, HDMI cables and power supplies. That's not really fun. Let's just look at the system and the controller. So, here is the system. You can see that it's white and red. I do like the color scheme. You can put your Genesis games in here, your SNES games in here, and your NES games in here. On the back of the system, you have your composite out, which I don't really know why you would use that on this system. Obviously, if you're interested in the system, you're more than likely interested in the HDMI out portion of it, and a power thing. Now, what I like about the system is that in the front here, press a little button, and this flap comes down, and this flap has all the fun stuff. You have your controller ports for Super Nintendo, Genesis, your toggle switch for region, your toggle switch for which controller you're using, and of course, NES slot. So that's pretty cool. Now, let's take a look at the controller. Here is the controller for the system. As you can see, has a 4-button design with 2 trigger buttons, definitely sort of modeled after the Super Nintendo. You have your D-pad, your start and select, and it's even modeled so much after a Super Nintendo controller that it has a Super Nintendo slot. Now my Super Nintendo is currently packed away because I'm in the process of moving, but more than likely this will work on a Super Nintendo, so that's pretty cool to keep in mind. Now, of course, a controller and a system only does so much. If it doesn't play games and doesn't play games well, what's the point of the system? So I have actually prepared a bunch of different games, a bunch of unique things to sort of really see what this system is capable of. So let's see what I can come up with as far as playing games on this system. Alright, so we're starting things out with a classic Double Dragon on the NES, one of my favorite games of all time, one of my favorite games on the system. As you can see, everything looks good except for the fact that everything is 16:9, and that is because the Super Retro Trio Plus only outputs in 16:9. So if this is a big deal for you, it's definitely worth mentioning. I have a television that allows me to change the aspect ratio to 4:3, so I didn't notice it until after when I was actually looking at the footage because everything on my TV appeared in 4:9, but it is worth mentioning. Now, I think the game still looks good. I didn't really notice major input lag. Occasionally here and there might have been a little bit of input lag, but everything seemed to work good for the most part. The colors look nice, the graphics look crisp, and the audio is pretty much on par with how it would sound on your original NES. So far we're off to a good start. Now, what is an NES test though if we do not test out Castlevania 3 on the NES? Once again, another amazing game. Definitely a hardware pusher of the system. I'm pretty sure this was in my NES hardware pushers video, and as you can see, everything is running up to snuff. Everything looks good, everything sounds good, the controls are nice and fluid, and everything is working as it should. Castlevania 3, of course, another one of the greatest NES games of all time. Definitely a special game. If you've never played it before, well, what are you doing with your life? Just pause the video, go play this somehow, and then come back and watch the rest of it. But no, so far, you always have to check out Castlevania 3 because a lot of the older clone systems do not play this game or play it with major problems, but you can see the Super Retro Trio Plus, no issues with Castlevania 3, so that is always good to see. Now, up next, I wanted to check out some Super Nintendo games, but this system actually plays Super Famicom as well, so I just decided to skip the Super Nintendo and go straight to the Super Famicom. And here you can see Rockman X on the Super Famicom. Obviously, I do not own Mega Man X because I am a cheap person. So this is Rockman X. You don't don't have to do any sort of special adapters or anything. It just actually plugs right into the Super Nintendo cartridge slot. I did play some Super FX chip Super Nintendo games as well. I went with Doom, and then I realized how ugly Doom is just as a game, so I didn't really want to show that off. But the Super FX chip games did work. I played Donkey Kong Country on the system as well. Mode 7 games, no issues with any of those. But I did want to show off a Super Famicom game, because that's pretty cool that you can just play Super Famicom games. A lot of Super Famicom game versions of Super Nintendo games are much cheaper, so it's a good way to collect for the system if you collect Super Famicom. Nice way to play them in HD. Now we gotta show the Genesis some love, so I went with Streets of Rage 2, one of my favorite games. I love beat-em-up games if you haven't picked up on that. And once again, I think everything looks pretty good. You know, it is 16:9, but, you know, in this game it didn't really bother me, honestly. I think the NES games sort of bother me with 16:9 more so than Genesis games, and I don't really know why that is, because I obviously played them both on CRT TVs back in the day, but it just seems like the adjustment is a little easier for me to handle with this. So we've seen the 3 systems that it plays, well, really 4 systems. We've seen the NES, the Super Nintendo or Super Famicom, which I showed off, and the Genesis. But in this video, I wanted to be a little bit more creative. I wanted to try some sort of outside the box things that maybe other reviewers didn't try. So the next thing we're going to try is one of my favorite things in the entire world, the Super Game Boy. I adore the Super Game Boy. I think it is one of the most underrated peripherals of all time. You know what? It is the best peripheral of all time. Nothing is better. So we're going to check out Killer Instinct on the Super Game Boy on the Super Retro Trio Plus. And so once again, now we're up to another system. So we've got an NES, we've gotten Super Nintendo, Super Famicom, Sega Genesis, and now we're able to play Game Boy games on this as well. If you've never played this version of Killer Instinct, it is nowhere near as good as the Super Nintendo version, but it is pretty impressive that it was on the Game Boy. And you can see that the Super Game Boy sort of enhances the game with this cool border around the screen. That's what I loved about the Super Game Boy, just little intricacies like this. And there were so many games that had Super Game Boy specific features. So I was really happy that the Super Game Boy ended up working with this system. And I look like a total professional in this game, but I'm really not. I'm really terrible at it, but I looked really good while I was capturing the footage. Now, the final system I wanted to check out is the Sega Master System. Now, I used my Power-Base Mini Converter from Stone Age Gamer, and I plugged it into the Genesis slot. I plugged in Double Dragon for the Sega Master System, and voila! So I got another system out of this. So if you have a Super Game Boy, you could play Game Boy games on the system. If you have a Power-Base Mini, which is about $40, you can play Master System games on the system. So I was able to get 6 different consoles out of this system, and I thought that was really cool. It played homebrew games. It played pretty much everything I threw at it. The only issue I had with any sort of game was actually a weird thing. It was a Game Gear converted to a Master System game and I tried to play it on the Power-Base Mini and it didn't work, but I didn't really expect it to work either because that actually, I think, only works on original hardware. But I was able to get 6 different systems. They all worked well, and they all played all of the main games and all of the, you know, important games that a system should play. I didn't run into any compatibility issues. So what do I think about this system as a whole? What do I like about it? What do I dislike about it? Let's get to my final thoughts and draw some conclusions on the Super Retro Trio Plus. So what are my final thoughts on the Super Retro Trio Plus? There are things I like about the system, there are things I dislike about the system. I figured let's get the dislikes out of the way and then talk about the likes and get to my final conclusion. As far as dislikes are concerned, I did notice a bit of input lag from time to time. Never was really prevalent, but sometimes I felt like, you know, I pressed the button faster than that, it should have done something, and it just seemed to not work. Now, that doesn't really happen too often to me, but it was worth mentioning. The biggest thing I have with the system is just the fact that everything outputs into 16:9 and there's no way to put it in 4:3 mode. Now, some televisions allow you to do it in 4:3 mode. Luckily, my television that I was actually recording this game footage on does that. And as I was looking at the footage back, I'm like, oh no, it's 16:9, that sucks. Because I just prefer 4:3 when I'm playing the games. I like the original aspect ratio. The stretch aspect ratio just doesn't really appeal to me. So that is worth mentioning. If your TV can adjust it into game mode, I think everything looks pretty good, but the 16:9 can be a bit
bit distracting. Now, as far as what I like about the system, I like that I was able to play 6 different consoles on the system. I was able to play NES, Super NES, Genesis, Super Famicom, Super Game Boy, and even Master System games with the Power-based Mini. So I thought that was pretty cool. You know, it played everything I threw at it, from homebrew games to Super FX chip games, so everything worked well, and I really like that about the system. So should you pick up this system? Is this something you should be in the market for? I think it depends sort of what sort of retro gamer you are. If you're a hardcore retro gamer who has like HDMI modded systems and stuff like that, this product isn't really for you. I don't think you'll get any enjoyment of it. There's not really a reason for you to check this out, but you probably already knew that before clicking on the video. I really think this system is more for casual retro gamers, someone who maybe has a handful of NES games, Super NES games, and Genesis games, doesn't care about aspect ratios and all that stuff, just wants to play the games on their HD TV. For 80 bucks, it's definitely not a bad pickup. I think I had some fun with the system. I was able to have more fun because it was in 4x3 mode, in my opinion, but I think casual gamers will enjoy this system, especially if they just have, you know, a little variety of different games to choose from. So that's all I really got to say about the system. It's pretty decent, but I do wish there was that stupid 4x3 and 16:9 toggle switch. It would have solved so many problems. It would have solved so many problems. But let me know in the comments section down below what you think about this system, what you think about the footage that I showed, all the different systems I captured it playing, and thank you for checking out this video. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave me your thoughts in the comments section down below, and check out different the links in the description box. I can't even talk right now. In the description box, there's a website, there's a Patreon, there's t-shirts, there's social media, there's all sorts of cool stuff. You want to be a cool kid? Then check out those links. And I'll catch you guys next time. Later.
RGT 85, RGT 85. RGT 85.